Steve Suarez. I'm the CEO of Horizon X. I'm also a senior advisor at McKinsey, actually, who's coming up next. But I'm really fortunate to be moderating this panel. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. When we were in Amsterdam, we were talking about how do we make Boston a really big and get a lot of people coming here. And we said we need to bring some big names in the industry. And the names that came up was Peter and Will. And Lawrence was saying, hey, do you think we can pull this off? And sure enough, here we are. So this has been a long time in the making. I'm going to get right to it because we only have 20 minutes and we have a lot to get through. So Peter, I'm going to start with you. When you came up with this, what inspired you to come up with this algorithm, the Shor's algorithm?
Okay, so the short version is I saw a talk by Umesh Bazarani at Bell Labs, and he talked about quantum computing.
Yeah.
And he basically gave the, I guess, the model of quantum computers, and he gave a problem which he thought quantum computers were faster on. But this was a completely contrived problem. It wasn't a problem that anybody ever would want to solve.
Excellent.
And after that, I saw Dan Simon's algorithm, where he gave another contrived problem, which had a much more natural algorithm. And by looking at Simon's algorithm, I was able to find Shor's algorithm.
And how long did that process take?
So Umesh Bazarani gave the talk, I think in fall of 1993, and I came up with my algorithm in April of 1994. So it's 6 months or so.
Excellent, excellent. Did you think it was going to be this impactful, this big? Everybody here is in this room, and I've been hearing for last week, as I've been talking to everybody, it's like, oh, I can't wait to see Peter, I can't wait to take a picture of Peter. You can see the enthusiasm. Did you think it was going to be this impactful to the world?
Well, when I came up with the algorithm, I thought it was going to be completely impractical. And, you know, it was a great theoretical advance. I knew it was a great theoretical advance, and, you know, a lot of people were interested in the result, but I didn't think I'd ever see, you know, quantum computers implemented.
And have an algorithm named after you. Mm-hmm. I know when I was in your office a couple years ago, we were talking about it, and it's just incredible how many people just talk about Shor's algorithm, and that's kind of what started a whole industry. Will, I'll come over to you. You're on the other side of that, right? So he's come up with the algorithm, and you're working on the hardware to make the algorithm operate. What inspired you to get into this and work on?
Well, certainly around the time that I was graduating with a PhD from Stanford, 2003, quantum computing was quite nascent. We knew about Shor's algorithm and we knew about early error correction concepts, but the question was, can you actually do this? Can you actually build such a system? And at the time, it was quite a challenge, and it was, of course, based on quantum mechanics. That's very interesting. And I think most of us in the field, including myself, said, hey, let's give this a try. Worst case, it's a pretty interesting laboratory curiosity. You know, gee whiz, look, we can take superconducting circuits and turn them into something that's quantum mechanical. That was around 2003. You know, 10 years later, we stepped back and oh wow, gee whiz, this actually works. And I don't just have 1 qubit or 2 qubits, I've got more than that. And of course, since then, it's only exploded and it's accelerating now. So it's quite exciting time.
So, and I know, Will, you work in superconducting. What drove you down working in superconducting versus, I don't think there was neutral atoms back then, but like trapped ions or others?
There were ions, I think concepts of neutral atoms, cavity QED, things like this, semiconductor qubits. You know, it was luck, I'll say. You know, I thought that if this is going to become a manufacturable technology in the future, we should do it with something that's going to be on silicon wafers. Superconducting qubits are manufactured artificial atoms on wafers. And, you know, that was about the extent of it, right? My PhD, I had done some cryogenics, so I thought, okay, at least this rhymes with what I did before, but it's not exactly the same. And at the time, superconducting qubits were the dog of quantum computing. They were very poor. If you read Ike Chuang's book, He's got a section for each of these modalities and then everything else. And superconducting was in the everything else because it would never work, right?
That's great. So Peter, obviously the Shor's algorithm had a big impact. And when I look at the algorithms, I know there's Grover's and there's others, which actually, it's kind of funny that Will has somebody on his team, Jeff Grover. I was kind of hoping, I don't know if Jeff's in the crowd, but it would be good to put Jeff and Shor together. But when you came up with this, ever since then, I haven't heard a proliferation of all these algorithms. Why is that? Why, after kind of Shor's, there hasn't been a lot of algorithms that have come out?
Yeah, well, we haven't discovered very many more algorithms. And the ones we have discovered are for abstruse problems that nobody actually wants to solve in practice. Okay, I'm going to make an exception for simulating physics and maybe complicated quantum mechanical molecules. But aside from those two things, you have obscure number theory problems for algorithms. So there are possibly a couple of reasons for this, and I don't really know which one. I mean, one is that there aren't that many more algorithms. Another is that we're not smart enough to discover more algorithms. And I have a lot of hope that that's the case, because if you look back at the development of classical computer algorithms, there are an incredible number of them that never would have been discovered without experimentation on classical computers. And the best example of this is the simplex algorithm for linear programming. And Danzig discovered that in the 1950s, but for 50 years, nobody could prove that it actually worked.
Wow.
And there was a proof. I mean, there were a couple of mathematical theorems which gave, indications that it actually worked, but the first proof of this came somewhere around 2000, and was by Dan Spielman and Tang, and they discovered it. They discovered this proof at MIT, and it's a really remarkable proof.
Excellent, excellent. If you were talking, because we have a lot of algorithm developers here, I've been meeting some people and they're working on algorithms. What advice do you have for them? Because I agree with you, I'm hoping it is the second, and I hope it is that we're just not smart enough and working through. It actually reminds me, when I was in your office, you and I took a selfie, and there was a whole bunch of equations in the back of your blackboard, and my wife asked you, do you mind if we take pictures? And you turned around, looked around, and he goes, nobody will understand them. Go ahead and take the pictures. So pretty much saying, yeah, you're not smart enough to understand it and stuff like that. So I know the feeling. But you have some people here, and I've met a lot of people here trying to develop algorithms. What advice do you have for them in their quest to do that experimentation and developing algorithms?
So if I knew how to develop quantum algorithms, I would have done it. So I guess my advice is try all sorts of weird ideas. Get a quantum computer and do some experimentation and see if that gives you some, hope that your ideas work. And I guess that's around it.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Now, Will, going back to quantum computers, because you're trying to build the computer so that we can, well, I don't know if it's for running Shor's algorithm, right?
It's for all of it. Yeah.
For all of it.
Yeah.
Tell us kind of your inspiration, kind of where you are. What are your thoughts about where we are today? And also, we're getting a lot of excitement. You see the stock market, you see investors, a lot of people jumping in now. I'd love to hear your thoughts about where we are from a hardware perspective, and then where do you see us going from here?
Yeah, there's couple answers I can give to that. One is, as Peter just said, how do we develop new algorithms? And we absolutely need new algorithms, more algorithms, if we want to realize, a commercial quantum advantage. And it's really about fingers on keyboards. And hats off to IBM for putting so many quantum computers out there where people can actually start to use them and explore them. And people like Peter, in the abstract, can come up with fantastic algorithms. But for the rest of us, I think we just need to try and see what we can do, and thereby develop more algorithms. So it's very important that we develop more algorithms, particularly with commercial relevance. On the hardware side, it's a very exciting time. There are multiple platforms: superconducting, trapped ion, neutral atoms, semiconducting, and others, photonic, for example.
Photonics, yeah, don't forget photonics.
And the level that we're at about 100-ish qubits, right? So we're starting to define what might be considered a module. And you can start then to connect together modules. So modularity, a very important part of systems engineering. This is moving, there's still a lot of laboratory work to do, but it's moving from the laboratory to systems engineering, number one. And perhaps the most important thing we can do right now is quantum error correction, which as we heard, is part of 1995. Peter is the S in CSS, Calderbank, Steen, and Shor.
Yeah. Quantum
error correcting codes. And this is a way that we can sustain quantum mechanical behavior for long enough periods of time to run algorithms that are commercially relevant. And we're at an error rate today of 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. But if we want to do something useful, we need to be at 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion. And we're not going to make up that difference by making the individual qubits better themselves. But what we will do is quantum error correction, which I can get into, but basically you're going to form teams of qubits, and those teams are going to outperform any of the individuals, provided the individuals are good enough. And I think I mentioned my son's birthday is tomorrow. We're going to, right after this, I'm running off, we're going to go camping. I remember when he was in kindergarten, we would go to the playground, and it was heartwarming and totally chaotic. A lot of kids running around having a really good time. And you can imagine that if we added more kids to that playground, the chaos is only going to go up. It's not going to get better. But at some point between then and now he's 17, he matured to a point, he crossed some threshold where now if we put him together with some other kids, together they form a team which outperform any of the individuals. And that's the concept of quantum error correction. That's exactly what we need to do in order to realize the promise of quantum computing.
That's a great analogy. I sit with some startups, and it's still about herding cats,
yeah.
And kind of what I'm seeing. So it's good to see that maturing. And I think what Lawrence mentioned, kind of 7 years ago, 5 years ago, when you see a conference like this, it was very technical in nature. Now it's being opened up. I know you've got a couple classes at MIT where you try to bring people into quantum computing that normally wouldn't be into quantum computing. Why? And a lot of people tell me those are the godfathers of quantum and got them into quantum. I'm one of them, by the way. I took your course and I fell in love with quantum. What inspired you to do that?
Well, we formed the Center for Quantum Engineering in 2018 at MIT with the idea that if we're going to make quantum computing a commercial reality, it's going to take a lot more than just physicists and electrical engineers, applied physicists. That if you think of it in terms of a university, you're going to need people from every department, including Sloan School of Business, because you need people who understand business if you're going to commercialize. So the question was, how can we help make people quantum aware, and in particular professionals who are not themselves PhD physicists, right? Yeah. And so that was the genesis for the MIT X Pro course series. Peter is also a lecturer. Peter, myself, Ike Chuang, and Aram Harrow got together and made this course. There are the 4 courses. They're online, 4 weeks each. You take them at your leisure. And we've had more than 10,000 learners to date, and yourself included.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And it was great. And what we've done since then, and this is with Steve together, is that we formed an executive version of that course, which is only 8 hours, because some people, even if it's 10 hours a week, that's a lot of hours. And so we also have now a 5th course, which is executive course. You can take it in a day. And we've had a large number of people take that as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic course. I have to admit, Peter, in your section, I had to play your video a couple times because to understand. I know it was English, but it was great. And it was very inspiring to kind of hear from your side. So we have about 4 minutes left, Peter. What guidance would you have for people in this industry, in the quantum industry? Do you think things are going to be looking better and there's a lot more opportunity? Are you concerned about where quantum is going?
Well, I think the development of the hardware is going to continue, and eventually we're going to get something that works. And once we get something that works, we need to figure out what to do with it, which is why we need people to develop more quantum algorithms. So I don't see that many opportunities for quantum algorithms immediately. I mean, I think simulating quantum mechanics and cryptography are two very important areas, but I hope that we can find more quantum algorithms related to optimization.
Yeah, exactly. Optimization, simulation. And the US just put out 2 executive orders, one of them being on cryptography. So I think a lot of people are very nervous about the whole harvest now, decrypt later, or having a quantum computing strong enough to actually be able to run your algorithm. So, Will, I'm going to ask you something that. What date is that? So that I can put it in. When can I invest? What's that date?
Yeah, nobody knows what that date is, but I think that the recognition of these 2 executive orders and the fact that we're pulling in the timeline for post-quantum crypto reflects the fact that quantum computing is accelerating. And not only is there more investment going in, but the demonstrations that are happening and the new discoveries and the compilation of algorithms to make them, oh, you don't need 1 million qubits. Maybe you need 100,000 qubits to do that algorithm. This is all happening in real time. And it's not that, oh, we're going to have a quantum computer in, say, 2030 that can do Shor's algorithm. No, it's not that. It's that there may be a 5% chance or a 10% chance, and it becomes a risk analysis. At what point do you become nervous enough to say, wow, it's too late? And in fact, in some sense, it's already too late. We need to be switching over right now, because switching over is not a software patch. There's certainly software involved, but there's also a lot of embedded hardware that goes into crypto systems. And so it's definitely not too late. I would say we need to get on task, because it's going to take a good 5 years at best, and maybe even 10 years to really switch over. Now, US government, through the executive orders, have said we need to do this by 2030, and any new systems need to be PQC compliant by 2027, 2028 timeframe.
Yeah, it is interesting that these dates are moving up. I know when I started looking at it, it was 2045, then 2035, 2032, and now it's moving up. I think Google's paper really pushed the government to move that. And by the way, congratulations for selling your company to Google. So yeah. Well done. So we have a minute left. I know there's a lot of people here that want to take a picture with Will and Peter. Everybody give a big round of applause for Peter Shor and Will Oliver.